The purpose of DHCP is to automate the management of your entire IP configuration on your clients. So mainly your like Windows devices, Mac, Linux if you have those as well, but mainly client computers. Can be other types of devices. Most devices that can have an IP address defined on it can obtain an IP address automatically. So if you are in an environment where you may have smart card readers for doors or anything like that, a lot of those devices have IP addresses on the devices themselves, and they can be assigned from DHCP. Now, the way DHCP actually works, I have my client and I have my server. Now, let's say the DHCP server. What we will configure on the server is this scope. This is the range of IP addresses. So I'm going to say this scope I have here starts with IP address 10.1.1.25 through 10.1.1.200. Now I just completely made up those addresses. But the way this works, the first computer that requests an IP address would get the 10.1.1.25. The next one would get the .26 and 27, 28, 29, and so on. So what happens? My client is set to obtain an IP address automatically. That means as soon as this client boots up, it actually sends this broadcast message. Now, a broadcast message is sent to all devices on your network. The broadcast is actually called a DHCP discover. Basically, your computer is yelling across the network saying, if there is a DHCP server out here, I need an IP address. Can somebody help me out? Your DHCP server is always listening for that discover message. When DHCP hears the discover, it sends you this DHCP offer. Now, the offer actually contains an IP address. So let's say you're the first computer on the network. The offer is going to say, hey, client, here is IP address 10.1.1.25. Would you like to use this address? The client is going to send back a DHCP request. That request says, yeah, you offered me this IP address. I actually want to use it. Can you lease me this 10.1.1.25 address? DHCP receives that request and it finalizes the details of the lease and it sends back an acknowledgement, which we just call a DHCP ACK. That acts as, here is your address for a certain number of days. Now your client has the IP address. Many times when you hear this, the term DHCP will be dropped off the front. So you'll hear discover, offer, request, acknowledge, or ACK is what everyone calls it. This process we actually call DORA. Just D-O-R-A. Discover, offer, request, ACK. So every time you boot up, you go through that process. Now let's say you already have an IP address assigned to your machine. Anytime you reboot your machine, it goes through the same process again to obtain an IP address. If your address is 50% of the lease time has lapsed, it will actually renew the address. Now, we'll create some DHCP scopes, but when you create a scope, the default time a scope leases an address for is 8 days. Now, you can set it to whatever you want, but it's 8 days by default. So what happens? When this is 50% expired, so 4 days, your client will automatically renew the same IP address it already has. So let's say you just don't cut your computer off for the week. You obtain an IP address. 4 days later, it's going to renew the same IP address. 4 days later, it's going to renew that same IP address again and again and again. And you'll just indefinitely keep the same IP address because it'll just keep renewing whenever it hits 50%. Or whenever you start up. Now let's say for some reason you've not rebooted, your lease time, when it hit 50%, maybe there was a network connectivity issue and the DHCP server was offline, or maybe it just so happens at that exact moment it was rebooting, but for whatever reason it failed. It will try again at 87.5% of the lease time. So if it renews then, same IP address, gets renewed and you're set. If for some reason both of these fail, the 50% and 87.5, if they both fail, then you'll get to 100%. Your lease will expire for that IP address. Now, that's not really a big deal, actually, because what will happen when the lease expires, your computer at that exact instance will send a DHCP discover looking for a DHCP server. So as long as you have your DHCP server, say, back online, it will automatically obtain an IP address and you're back online. If you're an end user, you probably know that. If you're an end user, you will probably never even know that happened, or it'll just seem like a brief, momentary disruption for a few seconds. Not enough that you would contact the help desk or put in a support request or something like that. It'll just auto-correct itself. Now, the 87.5, that is truly an odd amount of time. I was initially thinking, why not 75%? Why would you settle on 87.5? Well, these are not adjustable. The 50 and 87.5, that's just the way it works. 87.5, if you made that a fraction, it's actually 7/8. So the 87.5 would actually be day 7. So they're assuming you're on this default 8-day lease. It'll try to renew at day 4. Then it will try again at day 7 to renew. Now, that's just like an FYI. It's unimportant because you can't adjust the 87.5, but that's how they settled on that number. Now, if you make this a 1-day lease or a 30-day lease, still attempts to renew at 50% and 87.5. So you can't adjust that or anything. Just an FYI, that is.